So let's talk about Saturday night's main event, and specifically Seth Rollins. He got injured during the LA Knight match, and for this video, I just kind of want to unpack it a little bit off the cuff with you guys, and I want to talk a little bit about Goldberg. I'm gonna do a whole Evolution, probably Saturday night's main event video review once everything is all done, but specifically about Seth Rollins because this is such a huge problem. Number one, Seth is apparently, according to all the reports, legitimately injured. Because in the moment, didn't know, right? Nobody knows. But all reporting coming out now that Seth did in fact hurt his leg, hurt his knee. That is number one, the worst thing. Like, don't want to see anybody injured, don't want to see anybody hurt. It's awful. And it really does put WWE and creative in a very precarious position and difficult one, I think, because of how much is involved with Seth, Money in the Bank, the storylines. But again, number one, hopefully Seth is going to be healthy. Maybe he tweaked his knee and he can keep going and it's not something he can rehab and stay involved and maybe continue on. And if he does have to take time off, hopefully it's a short window and he gets right back at it because it's important that everybody is just healthy and good. Having said that, I want to unpack a lot of what the implications are. So with Seth Rollins, he did flip and he was going to go to LA Knight. And when he landed, it looks like that's where he hurt his leg. Then they called an audible, it seems, where LA Knight then eventually just did a BFT, pinned Seth in 1, 2, 3, and that was it. LA Knight looked upset. Obviously, that wasn't the finish, wasn't the plan. And it's where do we go from here? I think that there's a lot that could happen, and Monday Night Raw is going to be really interesting to see what WWE does to kind of counter this and how do they deal with it. So first of all, do they drop Seth's faction altogether? Do they just put it on hold? Do Braun and Bronson go off with Paul Heyman and just carry on as kind of like a dominant tag team? Because not knowing right now how long Seth might be out for, again, could be weeks, could be months. We just don't know. And then do these guys get any different type of spot? Like, does Braun Breaker get elevated now to more of the main event tier, lining with Paul Heyman more directly? There's a lot that could end up happening. The other thing I wondered about was LA Knight. So it didn't seem like LA Knight was going to win this match, like the booking of it, like as they were setting things up. It seemed like Seth should have won. And I actually thought in the moment as Seth like buckled his knee, part of me was like, oh God, like, oh no, I hope he's not injured. But I thought, oh, is it a story piece? You never know. I was like, oh, if he's playing into this and even eating the loss to LA Knight, was he going to show up at the end with Gunther and Goldberg and cash in, or on Raw, he's going to cash in, something like that. But obviously it seems like it is very legitimate. What do you do with LA Knight? Because LA Knight getting the victory here didn't seem like it was the plan. And who can he go and fight now that's going to make sense? And the world title with Gunther is very much up in the air because you could have LA Knight versus Gunther at SummerSlam if they wanted to do something like that. CM Punk is out there as well. Like, we haven't seen Punk in a little while. What were and could have been the plans for Punk? Would it have been Punk versus Rollins one more time at SummerSlam? What about Roman Reigns? Was Roman going to come back at Saturday Night's main event? Was he going to come back in the next week or two to help build towards SummerSlam? I believe that WWE's posters and their advertising has had Roman Reigns on there, like Roman and Cody and Cena and Punk, and they're all on the poster. So I kind of thought, well, they're going to have Roman Reigns show up before SummerSlam to set up a program that could have been a tag team match with Seth and maybe Braun and Bronson going up against Roman and Punk, whatever. It does feel like now there's going to be a lot of moving parts. The other question mark is Money in the Bank. So if you guys remember, years upon years ago, remember Mr. Kennedy got injured? He won Money in the Bank, and then he was injured, but then like it turns out like he didn't need to take time off for the injury. He got a second doctor's opinion or whatever, but they stripped him. They immediately stripped Mr. Kennedy of Money in the Bank. I believe it was Edge. Like, they had a match on, I'm going to say SmackDown, and Edge won the briefcase, and off he went. And then Kennedy went off for injury, but he came back shortly thereafter. And Kennedy was about to be like on a huge ascend at the time. But because he lost Money in the Bank, all of that really, he didn't pick up from there. With Seth is very, well-rounded and a prominent force in WWE. One of the top guys. He's one of the major guys in WWE. So Seth can totally come back, recover without Money in the Bank. But what do you do with that piece? Like, literally Money in the Bank. Do you have it go to Braun Breaker? Like, does Paul Heyman in story, like, how does WWE counter this and pivot this? Does Paul Heyman gift it to Braun Breaker and make him Mr. Money in the Bank. They go in a whole new direction. I think it very much, do they just, retire it? Like they just cancel it altogether because Seth is out and they don't give it up, but like vacate it like a title belt? Or do they do it like a new Money in the Bank ladder match where they have a brand new one and maybe they crown a new Mr. Money in the Bank? I could see them doing kind of a lot of different things. I think it'd be cool in the story if they did have Paul Heyman turn around and he's like, Braun Breaker, here's Seth's briefcase. You now have it. That gives tension with Bronson Reed. Like, why didn't he get it? And they could play that out for a long time. They could also just have it held on to Seth and do nothing with it. Seth, we have no idea how long he's going to be injured and out for. And if it is only a couple of months, well, then it can still work out for him with a cash in. And that's a huge way for Seth also to return. Like, I know we're going way down the road here, but there's so many implications of him being injured for so many different characters, so many different superstars, and the storylines that they were seemingly building towards around Seth. So if Seth holds on to the briefcase and they just don't know, it might be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, he's still in the world of wrestling, in the world of WWE. He has until the following Money in the Bank to cash that in. So if he can make it back by WrestleMania, you could have a Seth Rollins WrestleMania cash in, Royal Rumble, or even at the next Money in the Bank before the match happens. And that is also a very cool way to bring Seth back in. And if Seth is going to be gone for several months, you can turn him babyface, or you can pick up where he left off and just have him as the big nasty heel, realign with Paul Heyman and go do everything. But the one thing I'll say is what ends up happening in these types of situations, and they're terrible. Like, let's not get that twisted. This is awful because I was enjoying what Seth was doing and I wanted to see what was going to play out next, especially right after Saturday Night's Main Event, because Gunther retained against Goldberg. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I wanted to see where they're going to go with Seth. Was he going to cash in really soon before SummerSlam, at SummerSlam? And where was it going to go? Was he going to add new members? What's the plan B he was talking about? Now that we may not get any of that, where do you see them going from here and with who? Like, does Paul Heyman, Braun, and Bronson, do they kind of just crumble and go away, split and do their own thing? But like I was trying to say is the one good piece out of all of it that can happen, not always, is other players rise up. It makes room for something really cool to happen because they have to pivot, and they have to pivot really fast to get a new storyline that will work and try to maneuver around everything, because it's not just as simple as Seth was feuding with LA Knight, no briefcase, no faction or nothing, just Seth one-on-one doing this thing as a bad guy. There was so much more going on that it really disrupts the whole flow. One of the good things that could happen is the elevation of other stars, seeing different feuds. Like, does LA Knight come over to Raw and be one of the top babyface acts? Do they elevate other people like a Karrion Kross and really say, okay, we need to push you up higher now because Seth's out. We need more ammunition and we need to fill a huge part of a story, not taking Seth's spot and even literally in the storyline that he's in, but trying to elevate other stories to make them compelling. Roman Reigns, what's Roman's situation? What was going to be his match at Summer? Was he going to fight Seth at SummerSlam? Like, we don't know. Maybe Punk was going to go off to fight Rollins, and now he's going to go after Gunther. And maybe certain things get fast-tracked where, like, maybe it's Gunther and Punk at SummerSlam. Punk picks up the world title. And then shortly thereafter, maybe by Survivor Series, Seth's healthy and comes back and cashes in against Punk. And, like, that's a really cool story moment that you could have. But you got to build everybody else. You got to have guys like Jey Uso and Sammy, I think Karrion Kross as well. On the bad guy side, you have Gunther as your world champion, but I do feel like you're missing a few other bad guys that are, like, you know, higher up that you can work with. Does Paul Heyman take the reins in character and they have him bring more people into Seth's group, and they have Seth not around physically, but keep it in mind that he is the leader? Because look at something like the Bloodline, what we had for years. Roman being away. Yes, Roman would come back, or he'd be on TV a lot of the time or some of the time, and he'd be able to do backstage segments, promos in the ring, but he wouldn't wrestle until the big PLEs. Seth, depending on the injury, maybe it's something like that. where Seth, maybe he can be around physically and he's on crutches and he's all taped up and he can't wrestle, but maybe he can still be there as the big leader, but he's got to rely on everybody else. I think it'd be interesting to see what they do with the faction. Could you elevate Braun Breaker? Because I think they have plans, and it really does feel like he's the next person in line. To me, that whole group really feels like a version of Evolution in terms of Seth is your Triple H, he's the leader. Paul Heyman is the Ric Flair. You have Batista and he's Braun Breaker. Like that's what I always see. And I feel like in months from now, or maybe it's planned for a year from now, the big turn where Braun Breaker breaks off. They did little things on Raw, Braun taking the microphone, taking things into his own hands. I would wonder if they're going to fast track things now, because if Seth is out for 6 to 9 months, I don't know what you're going to do with that story. Braun could step up as leader, or he's going to go after the world title. Maybe he gets it, and maybe it's Braun Breaker versus Punk or something. Like, there's so many different things they could do that will be interesting, because it's just not what you want to see happen. Okay, let's talk briefly about Goldberg. Goldberg retired at Saturday Night's Main Event, and I chuckle a little bit because I didn't care for the ending. I thought that was very disappointing by WWE, not the performers. So the match of Goldberg Gunther itself, for what it was, for a Goldberg match, style of match, I think it delivered. I think it was a better Goldberg match than what we've seen in the past. I think Gunther played it really well. Gunther was a great counter for Goldberg in terms of being able to bump around for him, to still be a big dominant champion, tons of chops, which is all really good. And those are pluses for having the match with Goldberg, because then Goldberg doesn't have to bump. He's not taking suplexes and he's not getting thrown around a ton. You have it much more confined. You had the spot where he goes through the barricade. That was really cool. You had the crowd all into it, obviously, for Goldberg's final match and moment. I like how they packaged everything. I like all the security and all his friends that were walking him out to the ring. So really cool moment in there. And the ending sequence where, you know, you had the ref bump from the spear, you had new ref come out, you had a jackhammer, which was impressive that Gunther and Goldberg made that happen. So you had the near fall, that moment of spears and jackhammers, and you're like, oh, Goldberg's going to do it. But there's a couple of things with WWE where I feel like they dropped the ball with Goldberg's retirement match and moment. So the ending where he's in the chokehold, and right before that, Goldberg kind of just falls down. Like he's sitting down and then he falls flat. He goes flat because it's like his knee, the whole story there was like his knee gave out, his body gave out. And Michael Cole's doing a good job, I think, and Wade Barrett, of telling that story of like, you know, it was like one more time and just trying to get like last gas out of it. So I thought the commentary did a good job. Goldberg kind of like falling over at the very end and then just kind of Gunther sliding into the choke. I was kind of like, oh, that didn't look as, I don't know, clean, or maybe I would have done that sequence differently. Like Goldberg goes for a spear, misses, and then it goes into a rear choke, and then Goldberg passes out or taps out. So I thought that was a little bit off. The main things that were off for me, I came out of it enjoying the match, by the way, just Goldberg's final match. I grew up in the Attitude Era. I grew up during Goldberg's streak. So for me, it's just nostalgia, and it's something you just go, hey, that's fun. It's fun to have a good time of wrestling. Some people will say, I don't need old Goldberg on my TV doing this stuff, but hey, I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't like the build, and not just because you didn't have Goldberg every week. I thought the go home segment they did, Goldberg coming out, just really, really hyped up. I thought that was the better way of doing it. I didn't like how it was never billed for Goldberg to win the world title. No, we never expected Goldberg to win the world title. That would be silly. However, he's going up against your world champion in a world heavyweight championship match. The world title was never really talked about. It was never the focus. The focus was always just his retirement. This is his last match. Michael Cole's the only one that made mention of it in their little sit-down interview, which they didn't even talk about. It was after on commentary, and Michael Cole's like, hey, what happens if you win the world title? And he's like, oh, we'll see. I didn't care for that because I'm like, well, you're not playing into it. You're not playing into this being a world title. What if Goldberg wins the World Heavyweight Championship? So during the match itself, they never really were talking about the world title. That they were never talking about Goldberg winning the World Heavyweight Championship. It was completely built as his retirement, which, yes, we all expected to be. That's what it was. then make it a non-title match or have a different opponent for Goldberg. That's where I was like, come on, you're gonna have the world title in there. Why not hype up the possibility, just for the story, just for the sake of the story, that Goldberg could retire with the world heavyweight title? They didn't do that. So I thought that was a big miss. The other big miss was going to be the ending. Goldberg loses, Gunther rolls out, so you're like, okay, we're gonna get Goldberg's celebration, his thank yous, his goodbyes. They cut to commercial. And I looked at the clock and I was like, there's 4 minutes left before 10 o'clock. They cut to commercial break when Goldberg isn't even talking yet. You had the final shot was Goldberg lying down and Gunther walking out of the ring, and it just ended. And I sat there and I was like, what is that it? Like, I looked, I was like, okay, there's like 3-ish minutes left. What are they doing? Is the show over? So if you were somebody a little bit more casual, like I hung out and then we had the moment after, they came back from commercial break, but you saw the match. So as a viewer and a casual viewer, you might be like, oh, Goldberg lost. Oh, they cut to commercial. Okay, that's just the end of the show. So you didn't stick around. So I'm like, whoever did that, I didn't care for that. I'm like, you could have changed that, I think. Why not give the guy a little bit more of the send-off? Did you have to squeeze in another commercial break? Another one at the end? Like, it just didn't make any sense. So then they cut back to it. So I'm sitting there watching it. And I'm like, okay, this is great. Now they give Goldberg his minute. I looked at the clock. I'm like, he's got 1 minute before they're supposed to go off the air. They didn't do an overrun to give him an extra 30 seconds or a minute. None of that. It cut off. Like, he was talking and then they just cut the whole thing. I'm like, that felt very flat. And I thought that was not a very nice way to treat a guy who's done quite a bit in the business and he's been around for a long time. And for fans of his, they'd be like, hey, I kind of wanted to hear the guy's, goodbye send off, and they cut it off because you got to go to the next show. And I get it's on network TV. It's not on Netflix. They can't control that as much, but I don't think you had to do the whole, like, here's a 2-minute commercial break post match. You lost probably a ton of your audience, and you cut the guy off for his send off and his thank yous. And I think people would want to see that. The final moment of Goldberg being able to maybe go to the top rope and raise his hand and his music hits and that thing. I didn't get that. So I thought that was a bummer. I think Seth getting injured is a huge wild card, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens next. Guys, let me know if you like these videos of just kind of ranting and going off the cuff a little bit. What did you think of Saturday night's main event? We got Evolution coming up as I'm recording this, so we'll see what happens. We got reviews, got all those videos. Check this one out, though. We're talking about Cody Rhodes and what could happen next, coming up to SummerSlam and beyond that. Does he turn heel? Ooh, spooky, not spooky, but just interesting stuff. Have a great day. See ya.